Good morning and welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show. And July. Whoa, July.
Already full swing.
Almost.
Right into it.
Like into the second week anyway.
How was your holiday last week, by the way?
It was awesome.
Yeah?
It was awesome. I took a little mini retreat
Ooh.
for Loretta. I know. I got away. I turned off technology. And
Sometimes you just got to do that.
Got to do it.
Right?
You know, I hugged a tree in the ground and felt better. Yeah.
Tree's like setting his cell phone down.
Yeah.
I'll hug you back.
Yeah. The tree was like, wait a minute. I got to text Mom and I'll be right with you.
I can only imagine.
Mama Earth. You got to pay attention to her, by the way, and she needs our love right now.
Yeah.
Then she'll love us back.
If you don't give her love, she'll fight you back for it.
She can be moody, I've noticed, by the way. You know, she's,
She shook a few things down south, so.
Wow, didn't she?
Right.
She really, really did. Yeah, I've been watching that, and of course everybody's been talking about the earthquakes, and a lot of my clients are like, I think I felt something, you know, and we do have that, what do I want to say? It's like that ring of fire, whatever they call it.
Well, there's the ring of fire. What is it? The Pacific.
I think that's a song.
Probably
burning ring of fire.
Well, that's Johnny Cash,
right?
right?
That's something else.
I can play. I got
That's a
that.
different type of earthquake, right there. Yeah.
Were you around here when the Nisqually quake happened? What was it, 2001, 2002?
Yeah, it was.
So I was at WSU finishing out my degree.
Yeah.
And I was downstairs in the library, and I just felt weird for a minute, and I looked outside because a friend of mine, Joel, we were sitting in our computers doing our emails when they were just starting. And we looked outside, and I could see the hills like kind of slowly rolling, and then they got bigger. And I'm like, are my eyes really like tripping out, so to speak? And he's like, no, I see it too. I'm like, I think that's an earthquake. And then within like 2 seconds later, you could see all the outlets popping up online, like Netscape and all that. They're like, oh, Seattle rocked by an earthquake, you know? And
yeah,
it was unreal.
Very unreal. Yeah.
But a lot of people saw that around their areas after the quakes in California this last couple of days, and that they could feel them and see the waves of those, the aftershocks and stuff.
You know, it's funny what you remember, because at that, I was actually getting out of my car. I had parked my car and was getting out, and I was standing there, and it was one of those things where there was a kind of a sound to it, and you can't quite process.
Yeah.
And then I'm watching the street light just swinging like crazy in the road, like I couldn't quite stand up, and then it hits you. It's like, oh, it's an earthquake. And then I'm standing there in the middle of the road going, what are you supposed to do if you're in the middle of the road?
I don't think you can do much
earthquake?
more, really. Just stand there and
just stand there.
wait it out. There's I'm still looking. I have to talk with one of our other producers here, Eric Ryder. He actually was here the day it happened in this building in Bellevue, and there was a video being processed in one room in our aux studio, and it was going through into our room here, into the main studio.
Oh, wow.
And Lee Carter, who was a former producer here, was standing, and he was like holding on to the counter, and it has the video of him
hanging on to the
hanging
counter.
on. I'm like, I wouldn't even be looking outside, though, because we have a 5-story
building
here,
yeah.
6 and 7 above us. But
Yeah.
I would just be kind of like panicking. But our building did very well. I mean, it's actually protected, and we've got up-to-date,
Yeah.
structure, so it's a good thing.
I think we have a lot of, I'm going to say safe buildings here.
Rollers. I think they're on rollers or what it's called.
Yeah, whatever the deal
They're
it is. So
perfectly designed for it.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
For the most part.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
I got a few cracks in
It's always good to be a little bit prepared.
Yeah.
And that
get
made me
complacent,
think
right?
about it. Yeah.
Don't get complacent.
Yeah. Always be prepared.
Yep.
And that goes for you, and that goes for your kids, and it goes for your family, and it's a good time to have a conversation, not from a place of fear, because that's not where I like to come from, but from a place of being prepared.
Especially when kids, do those little drills. I know it sounds kind of silly. It takes a couple of minutes, and before you know it, everyone's safe, and it's like, oh yeah, we remember that, Dad or Mom, and let's do this again or whatever. Just so they know, it should be automatic.
Yeah, and I think if you make it, like you say, playful like that, like, yeah, we're going to do that drill, but then they know. They've been through it.
Give them a little heads up.
Yeah.
And then, but don't do it right. See, this is how I did it, the last one. I gave them a heads up earlier in the day, and they completely forgot about it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just said it. I'll do it sometime today. And they just totally forgot. They were outside running around. Then they came back in, and then I made supposedly the earthquake happen. And I was like, shook their bed, and I'm like, get out. We got to go. We got to go. And so we did. We did our little evacuation.
I love that.
It was cool.
So you're an earthquake, too. You and Johnny
I'm an
Cash.
earthquake. Yeah. I like to shake the world. That's right. That's for sure. Shake some ground under you. So
Watch out, because here comes Benny.
about the
I think that's
earth shakes
it
under
was
my
the earth
Carly
moves under my
Carly
feet.
Simon?
I feel this. Yeah, I think that's Carly.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's I think that's your $1 million T-shirt, Benny. I'm an earthquake.
I'm an earthquake.
Okay, watch out for that.
It's a
Anyway,
lot to live up to there.
Anyway, welcome to, like I said, the original Loretta Brown Show. This is radio to open the heart, heal the soul, awaken the consciousness, and of course, we like to laugh. Laughter, I think, is the best medicine, and I hope that you enjoy. You're going to want to stick around. I have a great guest today. We're going to talk about something important to all of us. And before I bring him on, I want to remind you we are a listener-supported show, and an absolute thank you to all of my listeners, known and unknown. Some people are anonymous, and you really keep me on the air. If you want to be part of that support, you can go to patreon.com/The Loretta Brown Show and keep us on live radio. I mean, there's a lot of blog talk radio, but we're actually live most of the time. We do our best. Anyway, we are alive. That's right. I am the owner of Reiki Oasis, located right here in Bellevue, the greater Seattle area. We have lovely things going on over there all the time. You can find out more about Reiki Oasis at ReikiOasis.com. You can sign up for everything at schedule.ReikiOasis.com. The ladies class, the Temple of Divine Feminine, is going to be meeting Saturday, July 20th. And we are having such a wonderful time in that class. We do a lot of things. You know, the women sometimes need to gather and talk about women's stuff. That's kind of what happens. And then we do healing circles, and we do support circles, and we cry and laugh and have a good time. It's really, really good. We do meditations, and last month we did a cacao ceremony and kind of a little I call them self-empowerment things, you know, because we need to anchor that inside ourselves sometimes. My next Crystal Bowl healing concert is going to be Saturday night, July 27th. Saturday night, July 27th. I usually do them Sunday evenings, but this is an opportunity for those of you that have not been able to come out on a Sunday to come out on a Saturday night, 7:30. Wear your yoga clothes. You know, be hydrated. Bring a blankie and a face mask. You lay around. You get your tickets at Bali Yoga in Kirkland. Bali Yoga in Kirkland. Make sure you're at the right location. Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there actually an attire for men to have yoga? Like yoga clothes for men?
Yoga clothes for men.
Or is it just kind of like
There's the
loosely kind of fit?
Yeah, loose clothes is good.
Because I understand there's a huge market for the women's side of things.
I think you've brought up a really good point, Benny.
Okay. I'm welcome to model anything you bring at me.
Oh,
so I'm just
okay.
saying.
I actually have a client working on a line of yoga clothes for what we call the real-sized woman.
Okay.
Right? And
Plus size is usually what.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I'll throw that at her.
All right.
Maybe she can bring in men's clothes.
All right.
Because, you know, it's the mansy onesie is not going to do it.
Which I did wear last week. I did wear a onesie, but it wasn't a mansie. Well, I guess it was a mansie onesie. What is it? That's right. We've talked about it in years past, and sure enough, on July 4th, I did it again. I didn't even put that together. Something they're just really comfortable.
I'm sorry we're so silly this morning, you guys, but a couple of years ago, I ran across a mansie onesie that looked like a sweatshirt with pants, but it was a mansie onesie. You know,
So it's just one giant piece of clothing with a zipper.
With a zipper.
So I had that too, but it had shorts, and it was an American flag, sleeveless, and a hood. I'll show you the picture.
I
at the
love
break.
this.
Oh, it was perfect.
Oh, yeah. You gotta
I was the
bring
hit
that
at the
up.
park.
Yeah.
Got a lot of compliments.
Yeah.
Never doubt the mansie onesie.
I think so. I think you got something going on over there, Benny.
Sorry, I
gotta
didn't
think
interrupt
about
on your
that.
Bali
No,
yoga, your Bali yoga
No,
information there.
You're all good. You're all good. So, yeah, you can come out Saturday night, July 27th at 7:30. Crystal Bowl Healing Concert. They're always healing. People love them, and we have a great time. I know there's a lot of people out there doing that, a lot of people doing Reiki like what I do, but remember that the person that it comes through is really the instrument also. And so there's just flavors is what I call it. You know, I also play the piano, and I taught piano for years, and I would just try to help the kids find what I call their signature voice at the piano, because everyone's hands are weighted differently. So you know what that's like. Sometimes you just like one better than another. It doesn't mean it's good, bad, or otherwise. It's just the way that it is. So yeah, come on out. I do have a Reiki class the first Saturday in August. It's Reiki 2 from noon to 5. And like I say, you can find more about all of that at ReikiOasis.com. Very, very quick astrology tune in because we're in the middle of eclipse and retrograde season. We had a full solar eclipse and a new moon on July 2nd. We're going to have a full moon in Capricorn and a full lunar eclipse on July 16 to 17, depending on where you are in the world. And I'm not going to lie to you, my listeners, July 2019 is perhaps the most challenging month of the year because not only do we have those two eclipses, we have very tense oppositions between Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer is following your heart, and Capricorn is what are the structures, what are the rules. And we're being asked to move away from that Capricornian structure, that rigidity, and follow our hearts and go in a completely different direction, which is not always easy and doesn't always make sense to everyone around us. Ugh. They're like, what do you think you're doing? Have you just gone crazy now? And you're like, well, my heart tells me to do it. And they go, you're nuts. You need to get back to work, right? So there's a fine balance in there, but we do have these very tense oppositions. Mercury retrograde is conjunct Mars for 2 weeks, which means anger. It means wild, stormy emotions. It means, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And then, like I said, we're going to have up to 6 planets going backwards this month, which is really just a big look into your life. And my best advice is let go of resentments, let go of your limited beliefs, and really, really take hold of that fear around anything. And let's do some things to release it. This is a great month to stop drinking or smoking or stop those self-sabotaging behaviors that, it's like you say, I'm going to go do that thing. I know I'm going to do it, and then you never do it. You're actually going to break through this month. You're going to be so fed up. And I sometimes call it divine anger. It's that force of energy that comes through us and says, you're just going to stand up on your hind legs and you're going to go get this thing done now. So go do it. So if you need help, please reach out. There are a lot of people that can help support you. And please do not take things out on your loved ones. Not a good idea. There's a lot healthier ways to work that intense energy through you. And one of the best things is to take a walk, get outside. And like I said, go hug a tree, go stick your feet in the earth, look up into the sky and be grateful. Remember that gratitude, and I really believe this, gratitude can help change everything. So, breathe, drink water, get sleep, do all the good things. My guest today, by the way, this is so timely with the little astrology report, right? My guest today is James Templeton. By all standards of success, James seemed to have it all. He was a highly successful businessman. He had a beautiful wife and daughter. And in his early 30s, he had his whole life in front of him. And imagine his shock when he was diagnosed with cancer. His new book, I Used to Have Cancer, tells us his personal, amazing story of how he found his way back to health. And today, he's going to share that story and what he discovered with all of you. Thanks for your patience, James, with our opening, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Loretta. It's so great to be with you this morning.
It's really great to have you here. I think that, anytime somebody says the word cancer, I think we all go, like that. And for you, I think we need to just go back because you've been cancer-free for how long now?
Over 33 years.
Wow. That's a long time. And if my understanding is correct, they didn't give you a very good prognosis when you were diagnosed. Is that correct?
They told me I probably had a 20% chance of surviving 3 to 5 years if I could get through these experimental chemotherapy treatments that they had give me, at that time. And they said that, that was about the best they could do. And if I didn't do the chemotherapy treatments, I probably didn't have, that much time. So anyway, I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah, you are.
We're on the phone.
I mean, I do talk to the dead, but I don't think that's you,
Oh,
right?
no.
I think you're very alive.
Yeah.
I would love for you to go back in time, go back that 32, 33 years. Can you please tell us what happened? Because I know that my listeners are really, really listening. Yeah.
Well, I was just this guy living in Texas, and I had, like you said earlier, I had several successful businesses. I was a young guy, entrepreneur, and I had a wife and I had a little daughter, and I just thought I had life by the tail. And I even was in tremendous physical fitness shape, I guess you could say. I was a runner, one of these guys you see running all over the place. And when you drove down a road any given day, you'd probably see me running down the road somewhere. So I was one of these joggers, these guys that worked out in the gym, and the reason I got into all this exercise was because my father and my grandfather both died of heart disease at a very
Mm.
young age.
Mm-hmm.
And I, long story short, decided that, hey, maybe this was the way to prevent heart disease on my, side of things. And there was a guy back in those days that wrote a book, the complete book of running, and his name was Jim Fix. And Jim Fix was this guy. He was the running guru, one of the physical fitness gurus back in the 80s. And he was a guy that father died at a very young age also. And he decided that, if he took up running and he took up all this exercise, that he could sidestep a heart attack because his father, I think, died at the age of 35. And, he thought you could just about eat anything, do anything you wanted to do as long as you exercise. So I thought that I was doing the right thing, and I was a follower of his. And one day I went to the office and I picked up the newspaper, the morning newspaper, and here I read on the headlines, it said, Jim Fix, running guru, dies of heart attack while jogging. And I
Oh.
like fell out of my chair because here's this guy that I was looking up to thinking he had the answers. And then I got to thinking about it, and I said, maybe he didn't have all the answers, of course, and maybe I better look at my own self and go get a real checkup here and see how well I'm really doing. So I went in to one of these specialists there that did these cardio stress tests, and I got a stress test done, and the doctor got me on the treadmill, and he says to me, he says, my God, James, he says, you broke the record in my office. He said, you're in tremendous shape. No one's done this well on the treadmill. He says, you just keep up doing what you're doing because you seem like the picture of health. He said, you're going to go a long way. Your heart is in great shape and everything else looks great. But on the way out of the office, he says to me, there's only one thing I could find with you, and you might want to get it checked out. It's probably nothing. But he said, there's a mole on your back that looks a little different. It looks a little different than a normal mole. And he says, I'd like you to get it checked out when you get a chance. It's probably nothing, but I wouldn't worry about it and all that. So I did. I went in and got it checked out a few weeks later. And when I got it checked out, the dermatologist came in to look at it. He says to me, oh my gosh, I think you might have melanoma. And I mean, melanoma, he got all excited. He was dancing around in the room almost. He's really, really excited. And I never knew much about melanoma other than I'd heard about it and knew that it didn't sound very friendly. And I remembered my stepmother telling me people died from mold sometimes that turned cancerous. So this guy's going on about this and about how he might have to remove a large portion of my back, tissue, and all this. And I didn't like his bedside manner because he's almost acted like he'd won the lottery or something. And, it scared me to death. And all of a sudden, this wonderful world that I thought I lived in wasn't so wonderful, and I was living in a pool of fear, just instantly. And I left that office and told him I'll get back to you. And I went home, barely made it home. When I got home, my wife said, I think you ought to just get it checked out and with another doctor. Let's get a second opinion. And I said, that's probably the smartest idea. So I did. I went to a dermatologist that I'd been to before, and he thought that it looked suspicious, but decided to go ahead and send me over to a friend of his that was a world-renowned oncologist. And he said, this guy will know exactly what it is. And so I went there. I thought, well, if I got to go to see someone, I'll see the best, one of the best. So I go in to see this guy. He looks at it and he says, well, it looks suspicious to me also. He says, there's only one way we're going to know what it is. He says, let's just take it out and see what it is. We'll do it right here in the office. So he removed this large plug, out of my back, and it was probably 2-inch square. And he says, I'll send it into the lab. I'll get back to you in a few days and let you know what they say. So he says, go home. Don't worry. There's nothing you can do. Well, all I did was worry. I went home and I was walking around in circles, and I was on pins and needles and couldn't sleep. So it went on for almost 2 weeks before he calls me back. And he says to me on the phone, when he calls me, he says, James, he says, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And it was just like you hear these jokes almost. And I'm like, wow. So he goes on to tell me, he says, the good news is that it's melanoma. And I said, how could it be good? And he says, well, hold on a second. He says, the good part is that we think that we got it all around the perimeter of this area that we took out, this area where the incision was. He says, we think we got it all. So that's good news. But he said the bad news is that it's very deep. And it was very deep, and that means that it's more likely to spread to other parts of the body. And so we've got to really keep an eye on this thing. And he said that since it's so deep, we're going to call it stage 4. So it's stage 4 melanoma. And he said stage 4 is the type that spreads to other organs. So he said the only thing you can do is come in every 3 months, and we'll check it out to make sure there's no issues. And let's keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll never see this thing again. Well, he also said, don't worry, go on, live your life, just go back to normal life. There's nothing you can do. Well, I mean, how can you go back to normal life when someone tells you have stage 4 melanoma?
Yeah.
And from what I could understand, that it was probably going to spread. And I also started to read a little bit. We didn't have the internet like we have now where you can find something in 5 minutes. So I started to read a little bit and didn't find anything very good about stage 4 melanoma. And then I found out from a doctor friend that people that had melanoma probably usually didn't live over 3 years or so. That with this type of melanoma, stage 4. So I was just a total wreck now. I went from this happy-go-lucky guy, this guy that was ambitious, this guy that thought he had everything going for him that a young man could wish for. And all of a sudden, I was a different person, and I wasn't fun to be around. I was didn't want to go to work. I didn't sleep very well. I was just a miserable person, full of fear, full of anxiety, full of depression. So I was not a fun guy to be around at all. And eventually, after about 6 months of going back to the doctor, everything seemed to check out. But at home, my home life was suffering because my wife was tired of my difficulty and my, to be around. She didn't enjoy being around me, and probably brought out, a lot of things that maybe she wasn't happy in the first place with. So she ended up moving into town, leaving me, taking my little girl into town, and we lived out on a farm and in Texas, of course. And so anyway, after that, I didn't care if I lived or died. I was just kind of like floored. All of a sudden, my wife leaves me, and now I just had almost given up. And before I knew it, though, I found another area in my groin area that was like a large marble, and it was like didn't seem normal to me. So I go into the doctor. He says to me, saying, "I think we need to remove this. Let's see exactly what this is, and I'd like you to check in first thing in the morning in the hospital. Let's do some little bit of surgery here." He said, "It's probably not going to be anything, but we need to see exactly what that is." So he goes in, takes this out. I wake up and I'm in recovery, and the doctor comes in, and I knew I was in trouble because it wasn't just some little incision. I had bandages, in my groin area. I mean, it was, a 10-inch scar eventually, and it was just like this huge bandages all over. I knew that wasn't good. That wasn't some little incision. And when the doctor came in, he told me, he says, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you that the melanoma has spread to your lymphatic system." And he said, "That's not what we had hoped for, and you're going to have to do these chemotherapy treatments. I want you to do 80 chemotherapy treatments. It'll be experimental chemotherapy." He says, "That's all I know to do for this. The regular chemotherapy doesn't respond very well to melanoma, and I'd also like you to know that you have a 20% chance of surviving 3 to 5 years if you can get through these treatments." And after that, I just felt like my life was over. This wonderful life was over, and I didn't know what to do. And he went on to tell me, "You also have to do a lymph drainage, use a lymph drainage pump because you've got no lymph nodes. We removed all your lymph nodes, and we're going to have to, use this pump because we don't want you to get lymphedema. And if that happens, you could lose your leg." So I mean, here I have to do this for several hours a day, and then I had to do the chemotherapy, and there wasn't much hope at all, and I just started to feel like, I was going to go down the drain. And I became very desperate, and I knew that there had to be something else I could do. I didn't know about anything else, but I just felt that deep inside. And out of the blue, Loretta, I got a phone call. And this phone call was from a minister at a church that I went to, on a semi-regular basis. I wasn't a real religious guy, but I went to church, semi-regular. And this guy calls me up. He's the minister. He calls me up, and he says to me, he says, "James," he says, "listen, I've been praying for you." He says, "There's a lot of people in town praying for you." He says, "I want you to know one thing. You cannot give up. You've got to fight like hell. And I want you to understand that you can beat this. I know you can beat this cancer." And he says to me right then, he says, "You beat this SOB in cancer." And he tells me that. I mean, he said it the other way. But, I mean, he got my attention because here's this holy man.
Yeah.
And it got me. It just made me think, I can't give in to this. I'm better than this. I'm a runner. I'm a guy that knows how to push himself. I ran over 60 miles a week. I was a guy that ran on these races on the weekends. I was into all this. And he says, "You know how to push yourself. You can do this." So I started to pray after that phone call. And I prayed to God to help me. And I prayed like I'd never prayed before. And I wasn't a guy that prayed a lot. But I prayed, and I felt like every cell in my body was praying. I never felt this kind of energy before around my body. And I guess I was just so desperate to find something. But I felt this energy, and I felt that this calmness come over me after that prayer. And I felt like I wasn't all alone anymore. And probably 20 minutes later or so, after that prayer, I got a knock on the door. And I'm telling you, here comes a friend of mine through that door that I hadn't seen in over 7 years, an old college buddy. And I didn't even know where he was at, and here he comes through the door. Well, he had heard I was in there from an old friend, and he had these papers in his hand. And he walks through the door, and he tells me, he says, "I've got this about a guy that healed himself of cancer using a diet and a lifestyle. He says, a friend of mine at the office gave me this yesterday while we were having lunch. We were talking about you, and he brought me this article, and he thought that it might help you. So anyway, he brings this over, and I just instantly knew that I was supposed to do what was in those papers. And I didn't know anything about it yet, but I just felt inside of my body, in my heart and soul, and intuitively that I needed to do what was on those in those papers. That this was from the higher place, from God, from the universe, whatever someone wants to call it. And I knew that this was what I was going to do. And my friend says, "Well, you don't know anything about this. How do you know? You want to do this? You don't even know about it." And I said, "Well, give it to me. I'm going to read about it, but I know I'm supposed to do this." So I read it. It was about a guy that cured himself of cancer using the diet and lifestyle, as I said. It was a macrobiotic diet. And now I never heard of anything called macrobiotic before, because where I come from, you go to the doctor like I'd done when you get sick. And so he comes to me with this article about this guy, and I knew that if this would help him, then why wouldn't it help me? And he had written a book about his story, kind of like my book. And I just got very excited. I had my friend go get this book, and this book was written by actually an actor that was on TV back in those days. He was on a show called The A-Team, and that was back in the 80s, and his name was Dirk Benedict. And he wrote this book, and I really related to the guy because he was a guy from Montana, and he grew up on a ranch, and I just liked his kind of this cowboy mentality that he went for broke. And I thought that if he could do it, I could do it too. So now I'm starting to get excited about something, and I felt that this was from, all happened, in a short time from the prayer, from the phone call, everything else. So now I'm excited. I'm reading the book. I couldn't put it down. The next day, I woke up in the morning, and here comes another knock on my hospital door, and it was my stepmother. My stepmother came through the door, and she had a book in her hand. She's waving this book around, and she says, "Look, cousin so-and-so brought me this book, sent me this book, and wanted you to read this book." And it was a book about vitamin C and cancer. And it was written by none other than Linus Pauling. And Linus Pauling, anybody that knows about vitamin C has probably heard about Linus Pauling's work. And anyway, it was about people that had late-stage cancer. And when they took high dosages of vitamin C, they survived for quite some time, many of them. Some of them even got well. And I just thought right then, hey, if it'll work for them, why won't it work for me? So I'm going to do this new diet that I discovered. I'm going to do the vitamin C. And, if it'll work for these people, I'm going to give it my all. It'll work for me. And I'll do the chemotherapy on top. If a little's good, a lot's better. So I'm going to do it all. So now I'm excited. I've got a lot of hope going here. I'm starting to believe, starting to have something to believe in. So the next day, I got one more knock on the door. I got 3 knocks in 3 days. It was a funny thing how that happened, from people that brought me very, very important information. And so here comes a guy through the door, and he's a psychotherapist from the hospital. And he's this guy, and he comes through, and he says, "Look," he says, "I heard you were very depressed. I'd love to talk to you and just see if I can help you in some way and all that." He says, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Well, yes, you can, but I want to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a diet called macrobiotic diet?" And he says to me, "Hold on a second." And he turned around. It was kind of strange. He went towards the door. He went over the door. I thought he was leaving. And he went to the door, and he closed the door really tight. Comes back over, sits next to my bed, and he says, "Well, I have heard of the diet, but I'm not going to tell you cancer ward. I've been here for 20-something years. I don't want to lose my retirement and pension and all that. So he told me that, and I knew now I was really onto something. So he sat down there and he told me, he says, I've heard a lot of good things about this diet. I've seen a lot of good things. People get well from this diet, many people. And he said, I even tried it, but I couldn't stick to it. So he says there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do this diet. And he says if you do it the right way, you could probably get well. But he says you have to do it the right way, and you can't slack off with it. You've got to really stick with it. And so he went on to tell me this, and I got really excited. And he says, by the way, he says, you don't seem depressed after all. So he says, you seem like the guy that could do something like this. So he suggested 2 other books for me to go out and get and read. And so I did. And this was all about supporting, these other books supported the whole idea of what I was about to get into. And I was just very excited. So long story short, I ended up doing 10 chemotherapy treatments, and it was the worst thing I ever did in my life. They were terrible. And I had to do 5 at a time and then recover for 2 months. And then I had to come back again and do 5 more, and it was a 10-hour process on most days. But I was sick, so sick and weak from these chemotherapy treatments. And the doctor comes in one day, and he says, I'm sorry to tell you, your body's not really responding. That's why you're getting so sick. And I said to him, listen, isn't there something else I can do? He says, no, there's nothing else we can do for you. And I said, well, what about a diet? What about a lifestyle change, that deals with nutrition and vitamin C and things like that? He goes, no, none of that works like that to me. None of that works. And I said, well, what would you do if it was your son? He says to me, well, I'd do the same thing. And I said, well, I could die from these treatments because every night people were getting wheeled down the hallway and they were dying in that hospital ward that I was in. And this was down in Houston, Texas. And, it was one of these big-time hospitals. And they were dying of pneumonia, not from the cancer, from pneumonia and things like that because this chemotherapy was so hard, on their immune system. And I just didn't want to be the next one, and I just felt like as sick, as weak as I was, couldn't eat or keep anything in my stomach at all, that I might be the next one. That's how I felt. And I knew I had to do something. When that doctor told me that, I raised up in that bed and I said, listen here, you SOB, because it made me so mad, because here I had all this hope and all this positive energy around me before this, and now he's pulling the rug out from under me, taking this good feeling I had out and giving me no hope to look forward to. And I told him, listen here, if I could get out of this bed, I'd tear you apart. And I'm going to tell you something. He turned around, he went out that door like he'd seen a ghost. And I never saw that doctor ever again. And I can tell you, 2 nights later, I decided to get up and sneak out of the hospital at 2 in the morning. I thought real hard about this, but I knew that I wasn't going to stick around any longer. I didn't want to find out what might happen to me one night. So I got out of that hospital, and I went in, and I made up my decision at that point that I was going to dig in. I was going to do this diet, do the vitamin C, change my whole lifestyle, and I was not going to look back. And if it didn't work for me, if I didn't get well, it wasn't because I didn't try. I was going to give it 150%. I was going to be the guy that people would talk about, and say this was the guy that went all out and got well. I was going to be the hero in my own life, I guess you could say. So I made up my mind that nothing was going to stop me, and if it did, then I wasn't going to feel bad about it because I'd given it everything I had. And that's what I did, and of course, I went and changed my life, and it's all in the book, everything I did back then and everything that I would do again, because I had to do this over again, I might make a few changes because I've learned so much over the years. But I can tell you, it was the greatest thing for me because it changed my life. It made me look at things differently. I appreciate things a lot more. Every day means a lot more than it did back in those days. And it's a hard battle to have to go through. It was, a tough time. Losing basically just about destroyed my life. Everything I had back then. But when I look back at it, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's hard for people to understand that. But I'm still here, and we're talking today about it. And I still I just believe that people can get well if they set their mind to it, and it's not all just about diet; it's about everything. And it was quite a journey.
Wow. That is an amazing story. I want to let my listeners know, if you've just tuned in, this is Loretta Brown. My guest today is James Templeton. We're talking about his journey. He has written a great book called I Used to Have Cancer, How I Found My Own Way Back to Health. And at the top of the cover of the book, it says a guide to using alternative approaches to overcome cancer and regain your life. And for those of you watching on the video cam, this is the book right here. And it's a really great book, James. It's a very approachable, but you've got so much information in this book about, like you said, it's more than just that macrobiotic diet. There's a lot in this, and I just have to tell you that I'm really touched by your story and very inspired by it. I do believe in God and divine being, whatever people want to call that, and you definitely had something going on, not only with that minister talking to you, but those three people that came in. And yeah, it's funny because in the opening I was talking about that divine anger, that impulse that comes into us, and we're like, no, like you're telling this guy, if I could get out of this bed, I'd tear you apart. How dare you take my hope away from me or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking to myself, how many people are out there, and I know we can't quite answer this question, but are faced with chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and they are very, very hard on the body. And I'm really hearing you say how you really walked away from that. I don't know if that's courage or crazy, but you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely here. Can you talk a little bit about, let me just put it this way, what are some of the things that promote cancer, and what are some of the things that help prevent or fight cancer?
Well, cancer is caused from a lot of things. It's the toxicity levels in the body, and there's not one person out there that has cancer that doesn't have an overabundance of toxicity in their body.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say toxicity, I'm talking about things like chemicals and pesticides and household products that are in people's cabinets, that they're using unnatural substances and chemicals in their house, and they're using lots of sugar in their food, and sugar is a real deep cancer, and you really have to cut down on the sugar because it's like a toxic chemical to the body. And we all have cancer in our bodies, so we want to make sure that we get rid of everything that's toxic, like too much fat and too much dairy in the diet, and even too much red meat. It's very hard on the body. And I believe in eating some red meat. I do today. I'm not on a strict macrobiotic diet anymore, but I believe in certain non-negotiable things for a diet. And you have to eat, cancer-fighting foods that are very, very important, like the cruciferous vegetables, which most of us heard of, like the broccoli and kale. We see kale. Everybody's eating kale nowadays, which they didn't eat. And I lived on that stuff for years. And cabbage and cauliflower, and even something called burdock root, which I used to eat quite a bit of, and I still do at times. But there's so many things that you can eat that are so important. And one of the most important things that you can eat are part of the allium family of vegetables, I guess you could say, and that's garlic. Garlic is probably the number one thing that you can eat to help fight off cancer. So cancer is really an immune system issue, I believe, because it can't do its job. Every day we all get cancer cells in our body, everybody. I wrote a book that says I used to have cancer. Well, but we really have cancer cells in our body, but it's not at the level to where it's metastasizing, causing havoc in the body. But we have to make sure that we eliminate, this issue of cancer spreading. And the way to do that is to build up your immune system. And you have to get the toxic load down. You have to eat, organic, all organic. You got to get away from pesticide sprayed food that's been sprayed with pesticides and other chemicals and herbicides and all that, and the glyphosates that are in the food, the GMOs, which are usually because have glyphosates that we've all heard of that are very toxic and cancer causing. So you got to get all that out, and then you've got to put all the good stuff in to help fight it. So the vitamin C is very anti-cancer. I like enzymes. I take enzymes with food and a few between meals, and they're very important. But we all have the cancer, and the immune system takes care of it on a regular basis. But when the toxicity gets so high, it can't. It's overloaded. Can't do its job. So now, therefore, the cancer starts to stay around longer. And, we also have things like yeast and fungus in the body because of all the excess sugar. And the fermented, yeast in the body causes havoc with the immune system. So the immune system's got to deal with that. And I even discovered that I talk about in the book something called parasites, intestinal parasites. And parasites is a big, big problem. And I was told by a doctor, which was a world-renowned parasitologist, that he had never seen a case of cancer or AIDS that didn't have some kind of parasitic involvement. So, you got to get rid of the parasites. You got to get rid of the yeast and the fungus. You got to get rid of the sugar and cut it way down, because you got to starve the cancer to death and give it a lot of, I believe, vitamin C, which is deathly to the cancer cells. So, there's a lot of IV vitamin C therapies now that people are using to get really good results with cancer, and it's kind of like a healthy chemotherapy. So, when I walked away from chemotherapy, I just did it, and I felt intuitively that I needed to do that, and it was a tough decision because, I didn't know a lot about it back then, but I can tell you it was probably the best thing I ever did, because I felt like I was dying, slowly dying because of the way I felt, and I got scared and decided that, if this doctor didn't have any other positive thing to say to me or anything like, well, look, I don't know what else to do, but I'm going to work with you. We'll find something else if this doesn't work. They don't say that. It's all like this or nothing. And I wanted someone to hold me by the hand a little bit, not do it for me, but just direct me, turn me in the right direction, and say, look, I'm here with you. I'm for you. We can find something. This isn't working for you. I'll help you out. I'll do this for you because I really care, and I'm doing this because I want to help people. And I didn't feel that, so, I just felt like I was a number, and that, it was just like, didn't really matter. I mean, they see so much of this, they become numb to it. And I wanted to be around someone that really cared. So I realized real quick that the only person that was going to care for me was myself. And I had to take the bull by the horns, as we say in Texas, and do it myself and go all out and be my own guru, my own researcher, and always be open to new things. But again, you got to get all the good stuff in and all the bad stuff out. And I talk about all the things in the book.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, the book covers a lot of things. I really recommend people get it. James Templeton's book, I Used to Have Cancer, How I Found My Own Way Back to Health. James, can you talk to us a little bit about the Templeton Wellness Foundation and what is Unikey?
Well, the Templeton Wellness Foundation is a foundation that I started a couple of years ago, and I had a good friend, and his wife passed away of pancreatic cancer, and I tried everything I could to get her to try to do some other things, to point her in the right direction, send her to a clinic that has had really unbelievable results with pancreatic cancer. But I just couldn't do it, and it really was frustrating. And after that, I said, look, I'm tired of my friends, my family, my colleagues getting cancer and many of them dying, and I'm going to do something and start to give back and take advantage of my own story. So I started the Templeton Wellness Foundation because I wanted to give back, and I interview people that have had late-stage cancer, most of them stage 4, and they have survived for 10 years or more, and many of them 20 or 30 years like me. And they've done all kinds of different things, but there's some common factors there, and most of them changed their diet, their lifestyle. Some of them did a lot of different supplements. A lot of them did vitamin C. Some of them did different oxygen therapies and things like that. So I wanted to give people this information, not from me, from these people, so that people could understand what they did. So I do that, and I also have a restaurant guide that I'm working on because when people get cancer, they think that, oh, I can't have a life anymore. I'm not going to, be able to go anywhere, do anything. Especially if they've been on a strict diet, I can't have any kind of joy anymore in my life. And so I've been working really hard for the past year on a restaurant guide because I want to let people know where the healthiest restaurants are in America. And so we've got that. It's almost complete. It's been quite a ordeal, but it's about there. And it's up, but it's not complete totally. But it's the Templeton list. And it's on our site right now, the Templeton Wellness Foundation. So I do that. And then you also asked me about Unikey Health. Unikey is a company I started over 28 years ago because I didn't want to go back into the convenience store, gas station business, selling beer and cigarettes and things like that. I wanted to do something to really give back and help people. So I started a company that deals with nutritional supplements and parasite detox products, the things that I've been talking about, all the things that help to detoxify, help to rebuild, because Unikey stands for Universal Key to Health, getting to the root of all of our health issues and then rebuilding and then maintaining. And that's something that's been very successful for me, very important, and I feel like I've helped a lot of people, with Unikey. But now I'm really so excited about my new foundation because this is really going to kind of, I guess, help more people, because 1 out of 2 of us almost are going to have cancer in our lifetime now.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is Loretta Brown, my guest today, James Templeton, and I love the fact that you have this support out there, and I'm going to encourage people, whether you have cancer or you have not been diagnosed with cancer, remember 1 out of 2 people will have it, might as well change your diet and your lifestyle now to get James's book, I Used to Have Cancer, and then find more about him at unikeyhealth.com, unikeyhealth.com, and I love your courage. I love your story. And I love the idea that, we can actually be active participants in our own health at all levels of our being. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show, James.
Thank you, Loretta. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Blessings to you, and thank you again. Thank you so much. And to my listeners, have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. Contests are the responsibility of the host of this program and not KKNW. This is Alternative Talk 1150 AM, KKNW Seattle, and KNUC 98.9 HD3 Seattle.